we've talked so much on this great conversation about how Metasearch works and how to budget for it. And we see that, when done right, it can really generate some good returns. So let's say we have a hotel, that's interested and they're ready to take the plunge and do Metasearch. How do they make it work for them? And what are the things that you think that are most important for them to focus on to make sure that they are successful?
Very good question. So the very first thing I'm going to talk about with that is rate parity. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit more deeply than some of these other sections because it is so very important. If you have a rate parity problem, you really need to address that first. And there's a couple of reasons that I say that. That one is the obvious reason, and that is that if somebody else has a rate that is 15% lower than yours, well, then naturally people are going to look at your rate and go, well, why would I book there, right? And so you're going to lose that booking to one of the OTAs. But one of the other things that comes into play is the fact that when you talk about your auction that determines where you're ranking in terms of those points of sale there's a cost per click that goes with each one of those. And what determines that cost per click and that ranking has a lot to do with your rate parity. So I can often get a higher rank. If I have the lowest rate, I can get a higher ranking at a lower cost per click as compared to if let's say that everybody's undercutting me and I've got the highest rate. Boy, if I want to be in the #1 spot now, it's going to cost me. It's going to cost me a lot of money, a higher CPC. So that's an important reason that we want to make sure that we've got that. Now, within the industry, you'll hear a lot of references to a phrase, or sometimes they'll abbreviate this as MBL. And what that stands for is meet, beat, lose. And you need to know what that means, because what that's telling you is that you were meeting the lowest rate, so you were equal to the lowest rate out there. You were beating the lowest rate, meaning you were lower than everybody else, or you were losing, meaning that you were getting undercut by other people. And all of the different channels have data that reflects that will actually, in fact, if you really, some are more easily to get. Google and TripAdvisor, it's really easy to get, but all of them have it. So if you look at that information, you can get a pretty good idea how you're stacking up against your rate parity. And then it's really interesting to start looking at your conversions versus your meet, beat, lose rankings, because you'll see a direct correlation in between there. And that is really very important. So getting the lowest rate, definitely the first one that we want to make sure that we've got in that order. Next part is having clear goals, making sure that we understand what are the objectives. Are we leaning more towards that volume? I want to get as much volume as possible, which might also be a branding exercise. So for example, every time somebody searches my hotel on any of these sites, I want my point of sale coming up front and center. Okay. So maybe that's my objective. Maybe the objective is, well, I've got to have a really high return on my ad spend. Okay, so understanding what that looks like and what trade-offs we have in there. So understanding what your goals are and how that's going to impact the optimization of your campaigns and goals that you're looking at. Third one here is talking about the utilization of assisted booking models. Now, an assisted booking model is basically an example where the booking process itself takes place within the site that you originated on, that you started on. So Google, for example, has what they call Book on Google. TripAdvisor has Instant Book. Trivago has Trivago Express, and onward. So almost all of them have some variation of this. And there are some pros and cons to these. One of the advantages is that they do tend to convert better. And that's largely because of the fact they are mobile optimized. They're country optimized. What I mean by that is they'll be in the native language of the person that's searching. And they're a very quick and efficient booking process. You never even leave the site, so it's easy to do. So yes, they do tend to convert better. Disadvantage to these, though, is that now you're outsourcing your booking process to another site. And if we haven't learned our lesson on that in the past 10 years, eventually we'll all try to get that back again, right? So we want to try to make that come to our website as much as possible, because then that's traffic that's coming to our site. But then the next thing that happens by getting to our site, we also have the ability to do that remarketing that I talked about earlier. So even though we may be getting all the guest data from one of these assisted booking models, we don't get the cookie. And that's such a very important part of that whole marketing effort. Last but not least, we have having a strategy across multiple channels. Now, to be fair, Google is the elephant in the room. Definitely the biggest channel by far, will generate the most volume, tend to have the highest conversion rates as well. But that doesn't mean that we should forego all of the other channels. We have to think about it as a more comprehensive set of marketing that we're doing. Because otherwise, even if I said that they only represent collectively maybe 25% of the business, well, are you willing to leave 25% of the business there on the table? No, probably not. But what you want to make sure that you're doing is employing what we call a cross-channel optimization strategy. And so in this example, if you look at this, we've got channels A, B, and C. And if I just look at the revenue that's being generated by them, channel A at 13,000, channel C at 18,000. Look at my returns though. Channel A, 13 to 1. We may say, hey, fantastic. Channel A is kicking it. We're doing great. But you know what? Channel A has the least amount of revenue of all these different channels. So what happens if I allow my cost per click to go a little bit higher on channel A, increase that volume and thus that revenue? Yes, I bring down my return on investment, return on ad spend a little bit. Simultaneously, though, I'm going to take my channel C, which did have the most revenue, but a very low return in comparison, and I've got to reel that in a little bit. So now that's going to generate less revenue, but now it has a higher return. If we look at my blended total now, my revenue went up by $2,000 between those two examples just by making sure I had that cross-channel optimization. Also, my return on investment went up between them as well. So you want to make sure you're looking at something that applies across the entire portfolio. Does that make sense?
No, I think that makes plenty of sense. I think everything that you've talked about today has really, shed some light on why Metasearch, is so valuable, why, big brands and, OTAs are putting so much money into this part of the marketing funnel. And I think, hotels, like I said earlier, are really well positioned to kind of jump in the game if they haven't been in it, or take advantage of it now because people aren't spending like they are. And I think you've given us a lot to think about. Take this cross-channel optimization. There are a lot of different things that hotels need to be thinking about when it comes to Metasearch. And you clearly are an expert in all of this. And so if I have a hotel that's interested in doing Meta and activating Meta, how should they reach out to you? What do you recommend? Because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of interest after this.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, and they're certainly welcome to reach out to me. You can visit my website at basecampmeta.com or also go and email at info@basecampmeta.com. All those come to me. And Victoria, how can they reach you?
Well, you can come to us at our website, so epic-rev.com or info@epic-rev.com. We are always trying to help hotels, especially in this crisis, how we can all help each other get out of this and come out on the other side. And so, Dean, I want to thank you for this. Our hotel educational series is so important to us because we believe that through information is how hotels are going to be able to kind of become their most profitable selves. And so it is through great people like you who can help, inform us on these great efforts that we're able to provide this content to hotels. So I wanted to thank you for your time. And hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks.